Welcome and thank you for coming and joining this program featuring Saima Sitwat and her book, American Muslim Immigrant's Journey. This program is part of the Asian Arts and Culture Center's month-long celebration of creativity and diversity in the DMV's South Asian communities. This celebration was conceived and planned by a team of community artists and leaders, including Samia Mahmood Ahmad, Nadia Amdad, Ryan Arte, Shanti Chandrasekhar, Nilima Devi, Amina Farida, Harjant Gill, Farida Hughes, Anila Kumari, Shyama Kuver, Ali Flaila, Neha Misra, Adriana Morgan. So you can't hear me? Okay, thank you. I didn't want to adjust it. Post it back. Thank you. Is it he's okay? Pratisha Pradhan, Rachana Sarab, Priya Shekhar, Manoj Singh, Jasmine Smith, Shobha Subramanian, Nimi Trehan, and Nikita Yogaraj. And before recognizing our supporters, I would like to note our concern and care for our friends in Pakistan and Afghanistan as they endure incredible challenges. And I'm sure these issues are close to the heart of many of you here tonight. And if you're not already donating to these causes, you might think about doing so. Outside a theater, we have QR codes that lead to organizations that will take donations for these causes. And many of you know, but many of you don't, especially the young people in this room. That's great to see. The Asian Arts and Culture Center is we're a center in the Center for the Arts that focuses on promoting all things Asian and Asian American, helping to amplify voices of the Asian American communities. And we are actually a self-support department of Towson University, which means we are only partially subsidized by the university, and the rest of our funding, the majority of our programming funding and operating funds come from grants, donors, membership, any other kind of support, including tonight our two co-sponsors are the Center for Student Diversity and Women's and Gender Studies program. So please bear with me while I recognize the important donations that we've got to run this program this season. So we have the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the William G. Baker Memorial Fund, the Maryland State Arts Council, Central Baltimore Partnership, Yoshinobu and Kathleen Shiota, the Citizens of Baltimore County, Roe and Mary S. P. Johnson Legacy Charitable, and ANCC members and donors, Baltimore Community Foundation, Towson University College of Fine Arts and Communication, Jaya Mangala Dance Troupe, TU Department of Music, Alan Schechter and Rosalind Ehudine, Robert Mintz and Beth Arman, the Asia Collective Night Market, Anthony and Bonnie Montcalmo, the Harold J. Kaplan Foundation, Barbara L.S. Pierce, the Deep Vision Dance Company, the Baltimore Theater Project, the Lord Baltimore Hotel, Howard County Arts Council, Motor House, Center for Student Diversity, as I said, TU Genders and Women's Studies, TU Marketing and Communication, TU Department of Art, Design, Art History, Art Education, Columbia Tree and Lawn Service, and DC South Asian Council. So I want to make sure that all of these people made our programs possible get a good shout out. And if you are so inclined and available to do so, you can also give to the Asian Arts and Culture Center. Even $1 helps us, and we appreciate it, just to show, your support. We do have another QR code outside in front of the theater for that purpose, or you can speak with me, my colleague Narisa, and our graduate assistant Laura here. So we're happy to help you with that. And please join me in thanking Adika Syed from the Center for Student Diversity and Kate Wilkinson of Women's and Gender Studies for co-sponsoring tonight's event. And you'll be hearing from Adika in just a few seconds. And I want to let you know that in addition to tonight's program, the different programs that we have are an exhibit in the Center for the Arts, which is 22 different artists from all different walks of life with South Asian roots. So you should go check that out. And on Sunday, we have a concert by Tvameva Music. And that originally was going to be at Howard County Center for the Arts, but now has been moved to Towson University. So that's been corrected on all of our publicity. So if you want to come, that's easy for you to get to. We have a couple studio tours out in the different areas of the DMV. And then a cool one that we're having on October 20th is a Diwali celebration. We're going to lighting a bamboo lotus that one of the artists in our galleries is creating. It will be completed on October 20th, and we'll be celebrating Diwali with that lighting and having some artist talk and learning a little bit about Diwali. Then there's a couple of films on campus, Mississippi Masala and English Vinglish, and a dance performance at the Motor House on November 12th. So with that, I will turn the mic over to my colleague, Atika Syed.
Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight in welcoming our author, speaker, and educator, Saima Sitwat. Saima was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, and she migrated to the United States of America in 2003. Saima holds an MA in English Linguistics from the University of Karachi in Pakistan and a Master of Public and International Affairs from the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, University of Pittsburgh. Saima is also an alumna of the Leadership Pittsburgh class and believes in the power of storytelling. Her love for stories has taken her from corporate boardrooms in downtown skyscrapers to Punxsutawney, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, on Groundhog Day, where she met the famous sage Phil, who has been predicting how long of a winter we're going to have each year. Saima puts her faith in the word written and spoken to heal and challenge pre-existing paradigms. Her writings have encompassed a vast array of topics and genres, including opinion pieces, investigative reports, policy papers, and strategic plans, not to mention how beautifully she has managed to weave parts of my life into her book. So thank you, Saima, for that. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Saima Sitwat on the stage. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, Atka, for that generous introduction. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight and indulging me by hearing my story. Many thanks to today's hosts, Asian Arts and Culture Center at Towson University, and their partners in making this event possible. My special thanks to Joanna, Niresa, and Timothy from the University Bookstore to help facilitate logistics for tonight. So let's start from the very beginning. My first day in the United States of America. Is the microphone good for everyone? Okay. So each chapter of the book, American Muslim and Immigrant's Journey, starts with a quote. And that quote these are some of my favorite quotes, but they also provided inspiration for me to write that particular chapter. So the prologue of the book starts with a quote from Michelle Obama's Becoming, which is her memoir. Even when it's not pretty or perfect, even when it's more than you want it to be, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. The year was 2003. I stepped outside on my apartment's patio to get a feel of temperatures outside. The chill in the Chicago air on that November afternoon seemed odd. I rechecked the temperature on the Weather Channel to make sure that it was 30 degrees outside. Remember, this is 2003 and there are no weather iPhones and there are no iPhones. I stepped outside without a jacket, placing my trust in the numbers. It was 30 degrees indeed. The wind chill hit me as soon as I stepped out. Karachi, my native city by the sea, in the south of Pakistan, was never so cold when the temperatures neared 30 degrees. My first week in the United States of America, I stood with folded arms and puzzled eyes on South Ashland Avenue in Chicago's medical district. I observed people bundled up in parka scarves, their heads down, walking fast to avoid the cold. Those who dared to brace shards of chill air in their eyes looked at me with curiosity and surprise. I stood, a South Asian damsel, dressed in shalwar kameez, without a piece of warm clothing on my, bewildered by this contrast in the numbers and sensation of weather. It took me at least a week to recognize that all 30 degrees were not the same. My husband of 6 months, Bilal, a medical resident at that time, would leave bundled up like other folks during early hours of the morning and did not return until late at night. A demanding call schedule at Sinai Children's Hospital in Chicago required him to stay the night at the hospital every other day. It was not until the following Saturday that Bilal and I could go out together. As my husband stuffed himself into gloves, hats, boots, scarf, and an oversized coat, he looked puzzled at my attire of choice. "Aren't you going to be cold without a jacket?" he asked with astonishment. The conversation that ensued was my first lesson in Americanism. What I thought of as 30 degrees Celsius was actually 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Henceforth, I was to read temperatures in Fahrenheit and not Celsius. For the first 23 years of my life, 30 degrees had meant heat and humidity. From now on, it was going to stand for sub-zero temperatures. That was something I had never experienced in my then limited existence. That first year in Chicago, I became a student of Americanism. On this journey, I had to learn and relearn, unlearn and relearn. My first lesson was in English. I used to teach college-level English in Pakistan, but it was very different in Illinois. In later years, one of my friends from Rwanda would say, "We come here speaking English, but American is another language." I would learn that something that would light my way in the dark is a flashlight and not a torch. The latter was a more destructive purpose and therefore should never be asked for, especially if you are a Muslim. An alarm does not sound or ring, but goes off. And my favorite vegetable was called okra and not ladyfinger in my new homeland. And then there was the American culture. It was overtly gregarious and preposterously extroverted, where people of opposite genders shook hands and hugged each other all the time. It was hard for me to get accustomed to it. I came from a place where even husbands refrained from showing outwardly symbols of affection to their wives in public. In my native country, at times, walking alongside your spouse would be considered inappropriate. While shaking and holding hands was a faux pas in Pakistan, hugging between members of the opposite genders were culturally forbidden. Pakistani culture, rooted in the Islamic values of modesty and the South Asian influence of separation between genders, did not encourage any physical interaction between members of the opposite sexes, even if they were close or blood relatives. But America was a different story. As I learned American vocabulary, my body language also had to change. Men and women shook hands out of respect, but hugged each other as a show of warmth. For the formative years of my life, hugging a man had only signified romantic inclination. But here in the United States, it did not even mean displaying affection. It was just a way of greeting. I hope to graduate with a degree in Americanism in a year, but I'm still waiting for a diploma, 17 years down the lane. Now it is more than 17 years, almost 20. Along the way, I became a homemaker, a mother, a graduate student, a writer, and a community organizer. I learned the American stereotypes of Oreo, banana, and towel head. I also consciously recognized and learned to confront my own biases that I had carried all the way from Pakistan with myself. So this was my first week in the United States, and we will take it from here. So why did I write a book about it? And, as some people have mentioned to me, that exposed myself to so much ability by talking about things which have almost been like a hidden trauma or somewhere buried in my past up until this point. So one of the big reasons why I wanted to document my story in American Muslim and immigrants' journey is that I wanted to document immigrant experience from the immigrant perspective. And this is something I have found missing. I have not found representation like mine or my story in the literature. And many stories that are coming forward, there are writers who come from families. Jhampa Lahiri is writing about it. Ayad Akhtar is writing about it. Many East Asian writers are coming out. But still, I felt that those are the stories written by children of immigrants. And though growing up in an immigrant household does give you the privilege of having a sneak peek into what is it like to grow in an immigrant family or to have immigrant parents. It is completely different experience when you come from a different culture and a different generation yourself. When you are and raised with a different value system, and all of a sudden you have to adapt and become part of another culture. So this was definitely top of my list, why I wanted to write it. The other is that it was a time in my life, which was 2020, that I felt that that in our culture, we have a tendency to stereotype. Like we like to place people in boxes. Someone is an immigrant, another person is a Muslim, someone is a woman, minority, Muslim. But there is, our identities are more than that. Our identities are very complex. They come from different facets. So I am a woman, but I'm also an immigrant. I'm also a Muslim. I'm a mother. I'm a writer. And all these identities submerge and come to make me the person I am. Also, there is no singular immigrant story. And therefore, I wanted to make sure that I called this book An Immigrant's Journey and not Immigrant's Journey. Because every immigrant would have their own journey, and mine would probably be very similar because we come from the same place, but still there would be parts of her life, things she must have experienced, which would be very different from what my experience is. Immigrants come from all different channels. They come as refugees, they come as higher professionals, they come by crossing the border, but all of them do come in the hope of a better life for themselves. And that is what unites all immigrants. And then I wanted to touch a little bit in this book, and also I do it through my that what does it mean to make or find home in the United States, specifically in the United States, because this is a very diverse country, but at the same time, as stats show, as research shows, that the most heterogeneous societies are also the most divided, because communities are put so close to each other that conflict is easy. So if you read research on immigration, some of the most homogeneous societies, for example, Scandinavian countries, are the most open one. They're most desiring of diversity because there's not so much diversity. But here in the United States, we have to learn to coexist, and that comes with its pros and cons. Okay, so what you heard me read, it has the backstory, and this is a picture from my wedding, and there's a picture right after my wedding. And again, as I was going through my pictures, I wished that my wedding was during the time of cell phones, which could take pictures, because it was really hard for me to find any old pictures. But my husband and I got married in Pakistan. That's where I come from. I was born and raised in Karachi, as it was mentioned. And I came to the United States in 2003 after getting married to my husband, Bilal. I come from a family of educators. My father is a professor. He still, continues to volunteer for classes, and I think I got the education bug from him. So that is a little bit of backstory there. This is, both of us were married in Karachi. And then we came to the United States in 2003. And this is a picture from our first vacation. When we came to the United States, we could not take time off right away because my husband had already taken time off to come to Pakistan, and so we could get married. And this was the first trip, and we went to California, and we stayed with one of my husband's cousins, as is the tradition in our culture, that if you go visit a place and you have a relative there, there is no way you can stay in a hotel. They would not let you stay, and it would not occur to you that, you know, if there's a home, why should I stay somewhere else? I laugh at it now because the family we stayed with, it was so generous of them. It was a family of 5 people, husband and wife, and I was my husband's distant cousin, not even like first cousin. They had another guest who was staying with them. This is a 2-bedroom apartment, and somehow we fit into that apartment as well. And then the interesting thing we did was that we from Los Angeles, we also went on a drive. We rented a car and we went to Vegas. And I am going to read part from my book where I talk about the Vegas experience. And where did we end up in Vegas? By fall 2004, after almost 9 months in America, we were ready for the quintessential American experience, which was to undertake a road trip. The plan was to fly to Los Angeles, stay with one of Bilal's distant cousins, and then drive for approximately 5 hours to Las Vegas to witness America's finest. Vacation gave us time to discover each other more than the humdrum of life in Chicago. It was great to get out. We went to the Disneyland, where I got to know about Bilal's aversion to roller coasters. We shared our fascination for Mickey Mouse and Winnie the Pooh. It was exciting to see and have an all-access pass to experience characters from our childhood who were no more than glimpses for 5 minutes at a time during our cable-free childhood in Pakistan. I was equally fascinated by turkey legs. But what really impressed me were the ADA protocols for people with special needs on all the park rides. In the country of my birth, I had rarely come across people with special needs because it was not possible for them to be part of my fully functional world without any accommodations. It was only during the first trip to Disneyland that I realized the difference what accommodation can make in the quality of a person's life. On our first night in Los Angeles, Bilal's cousin casually asked about the hotel where we planned to stay in Las Vegas. The question confused us both. We had no idea that making reservations was a thing. Once we learned how hard it was to find a place to stay at the Strip over the weekend, we frantically started checking availability of rooms at hotels in the next 2 days. Whatever was available was either 60 miles out of Vegas or as expensive for a night as our apartment's monthly rent at that time. Flabbergasted, we headed out on our road trip without having a room to stay in Vegas. The rocky mountainous terrain between California and Nevada was breathtaking. I never knew that the desert and the cacti in the wild could look so beautiful. We found a room to stay in Mesquite, Nevada, almost by the Arizona state line, 80 miles northeast of Las Vegas. We might have landed in Mesquite through our misfortune, but it was an experience in and of itself. The place was so far removed from the glitter and dazzle of Las Vegas as the reality of my life in America was from the general Pakistani perception. It was our first time in small town America. The slot machines and noise inside the hotel was in stark contrast to the quiet deserted land outside. Our first morning in a Mesquite hotel was an experience in itself. In order to provide entertainment for those who could not find a place to stay on the Strip because of finances or necessity, the hotel had its own gaming area with slot machines and poker table. There were no viable restaurants on premises though. On that morning in September 2004, we hesitantly entered a diner full of white people. Nobody seemed to notice our presence, but we felt scrutinized. Nonetheless, such were our presumptions and fear of the place's unknown. The smiling matronly server stopped by to take our order. From a jargon of scrambled eggs and sunny side up eggs on the menu, the only items that made sense were different kinds of omelets. We were overjoyed to see that we could get a vegetarian one without bacon. Would you like some hash with your omelets? Asked our matronly server. Hash? I asked. Yes, hash browns. She replied. No, thank you. Both Bilal and I responded in unison. On second thought, I asked, what exactly is hash brown? Potato. The server responded with the disbelief of a person who would have to explain potatoes to adults. Not bacon? It was mine to be surprised. No, we don't put bacon in our hash. It's just potatoes, retorted the serving lady. Bilal and I were embarrassed as well as relieved. We enjoyed our first taste of hash brown. With jokes aside, I first thought of some version of the drug hashish incorporated into a bacon-like composition. Such is the stuff conspiracy theories in the minds of Muslim immigrants are made of. The perception our predecessors had created seemed to be as if the world out there is sneaking pork into our food and alcohol in our drinks. Our next stop that day was an equally fascinating Chinese buffet. We had tried out Chinese food in Chicago, but a Chinese buffet was a different experience, starkly in contrast with the expensive and formal Chinese restaurants we were used to visiting in our hometown, Karachi. You could eat all that you cared for, and it also proved to be educational, like the diner in the morning. We realized that Asian folks enjoyed and served meat apart from pork as well. And this is also something that our friends had told us, that all Chinese food has pork. However, to this day, my husband looks at red peppers in the Chinese food with suspicion, given the pretext that it might be pork. Let's stop there. So that was our first vacation together, and we have come a long way since then. And as life went on in the United States, there were many other things that we adapted to. Lifestyle was one. Of course, we became better planner of vacations, but something that I was really surprised to discover myself was how different American Muslims and American Islam was than the Islam that I was used to practicing. I grew up in a practicing Muslim family. And I have written about it in detail. So without going into too much detail, I would just mention that before I landed in the United States, I had never stepped inside a mosque. Women do not go to mosques in Pakistan, except for a few big ones, which are more like tourist attractions than places to pray. Women usually pray at home, though there are many mosques. So it was a very unique experience. And American mosques were also very different than what I had in mind, because to me, mosque was a place to pray, but American mosque, like other religious institutions in the United States, they're no different than the churches and the synagogues. They have Sunday schools, they do advocacy, they host outreach events, they do a lot of youth programming, and they're essentially an American institution. Most of them are 501c3s, which is again, allows them to do the work that they are in the community to do. And they're mostly community centers. And more women are becoming active in mosque. It was probably not the case when I came in 2003, but we see more and more women in mosque leaderships. But becoming an American Muslim was another unique experience, something that I had not envisaged or thought of. So I will read a little bit from that part of the book. This picture, by the way, is from the time when I served as the president of the Muslim Association of Greater Pittsburgh. I was the first woman, and to this day, the only woman. To my chagrin, I would have loved to see many other women come up, but I served in that position. It was a position that came with a lot of challenges as well as opportunities, but sometimes it was a happy place to be, and sometimes I was like, what was I thinking when I signed up to do this? So let's read a little bit from the book. So this is from a chapter of the book called American Muslims. And this chapter starts with a quote by Harun Mughal, who is a Muslim activist and writer. And he writes, if you are an American Muslim, you live in a community that is really struggling to get its feet off the ground. We are a very young community, so to speak, institutionally and otherwise. The way in which we are portrayed, it's like we are the Empire from Star Wars. And the truth is that we would be lucky to be the Rebel Alliance. And that really sums up how the American Muslim community is perceived, but where we are. Small numbers and an aura of otherness have shaped generations of American Muslim experience. A vast majority of American Muslim families have been practicing social distancing from other communities since times unknown. We are not fond of pets, especially dogs, given the popular belief that the presence of dogs keeps good angels away from us. There is no rhyme or reason as to how this cultural myth would have originated, but it has definitely played a role in keeping us away from dogs and social networking. While Americans are bonding over their favorite topic, that is talking about their dogs. In a country where people treat their pets as children, our pet of choice is often a fish. We find ourselves left out of conversations and small talk at workplace gatherings and parties, not only because of our aversion to man's best friend, but also because of dietary restrictions. Not only we do not consume wine or pork, we exist in constant terror of consuming it by mistake. Many Muslims, especially of South Asian descent, only consume meat slaughtered according to the halal certification, which, like kosher dietary regulations, mandates that the meat is from butcheries that are certified according to Muslim religious guidelines. The practice of slaughtering animals according to Islamic guidelines is called zabiha. And internally within the community, American Muslims are unofficially categorized as zabiha or non-zabiha people, which is who do not observe that restriction. Just like the rest of America judges Muslims for their unconventional dietary and social habits, the zabiha and non-zabiha guys are always at loggerheads with each other. The validity of the claim that Muslims could only consume zabiya halal meat had prompted many post-party fierce debates and aggressive arguments. At the end of it, we had all been beneficiaries of the zabiya halal specialty restaurants, which had enriched the American landscape with their amazing kebabs and lamb stews. Hijab is another categorization, or rather bone of contention, that divides the American Muslim diaspora, especially Muslim women. The American Muslim women world is divided into hijabis and non-hijabis, unlike my native Pakistan, where I hardly knew any women among family and friends who wore hijab. In Pakistan, those who choose to cover their head did so for strictly religious reasons, and it had no connotations of identity politics. This is different in the United States among American Muslim women. The word hijab connotes with cover and modesty in Arabic and Eastern languages. In popular diction, hijab is a piece of cloth that Muslim women use to cover their head and sometimes face. As against common perception that Muslim women are forced into covering their head, for most American women, practicing hijab is a matter of choice. According to the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, out of more than 40% of American women of the Islamic faith who say they wear hijab, 54% do so either as an act of piety, 21% to be identified as a Muslim, and 12% for modesty. Only 1% wear hijab because a family member requires it. The practice of observing hijab is as such very personal for Muslim women in America compared to some other parts of the world where cultural norms dictate it. Those who observe it here are its passionate advocates for reasons mentioned above. They have been called to observe hijab at some point in their life and do not hesitate in spreading their light around and converting non-hijabis like me to their side of aisle. American Muslims in some large communities across the United States, like those in Michigan and Chicago, also find themselves divided between the masjid crowd and the apna crowd. Apna refers to the Association of Physicians of Pakistani Descent of North America and is known for its ostentatious retreats with gala-like conferences, lavish bazaar, and displays of wealth. I hear some known nods. It attracts Pakistan's finest in America, whom those outside of this social circle often referred to as people with big houses and even bigger egos. This was actually said to me once. The wealthy Apna community had made its impact on the United States with empowerment only big money could bring. They lead political action, support medical scholarship, and help local communities with free medical support, especially in underserved parts of America. It provided a platform for Pakistani physicians, mostly Muslims, to come together. The pictures from their events often featured women in sleeveless Pakistani kurtas standing alongside their male friends, unlike pictures from mosque events where men and women stood at a distance with covered heads and lowered faces. Yeah. This is a slightly longer part, but I wanted to move towards the end of it now. In the immediate post 9/11 America, and this was my world when I have started going to mosque. In the immediate post 9/11 America, there were only two groups writing the Muslim story. Those were the US Republican government and terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, that is ISIS, a terrorist group commonly known as ISIS. Muslims living in American neighborhoods who enriched America every day with their toil and taxes were either living in denial or teaching their children never to respond to another child who called them a terrorist at school. As a community, the pre-9/11 immigrant American Muslims had kept to themselves and focused more on the ritualistic practices of Islam. They had founded mosques as places of worship and cultural centers and were happy to stay enclosed in them, protecting their children from outside influence and criticism. Apolitical to a fault, they did not know how or want to prepare their children for the onslaught that they had to face in schools and neighborhoods following the September 11 attacks. They hushed up the trauma that many American Muslim youth of the time had to internalize. The aftermath was a generation that grew up to be patriotic Americans to the core, normalizing every slur and hateful comment sent their way as part of proving their loyalty to the motherland. Another interesting part of this immigrant journey has been to raise my two girls. My older daughter is Sabina and younger one is Elena. They are 16 and 12 years of age now. And raising children in US or any other part of the world where you don't come from originally is an immigrant nightmare. Because every single day you feel that your children are slipping away from you. And you start with these preconceived notions of, I have written about it again in book, and there was so much I could choose to read. And it's really hard for me to choose what parts to read because they're also dear to me. But I have written about it, that how before my older daughter was born, my husband and I had this list of this checklist that she had to follow. And it included things like that, how she would go to Sunday school, how she would speak perfect Urdu, which is our native language, and how she would always be dressed in our cultural dress, which is shalwar kameez. She will not go to the prom, which is, I think, is going to be a reality this year, that she is going to go to the prom, and many other things. And she's going to have an arranged marriage, and that is as the children grow up, you see that they're not only and I think it is through the children that I have come to realize the difference between religion and culture. Because they are Muslims, they are practicing Muslims to the core, but then being American is also such an integral part of their identity. In fact, when I was coming to talk here, and yesterday I was going over my book, and my younger daughter was sitting with me, and I asked her that what is her favorite part. So she said that she loves the story about hash browns. And then she again said, which she has said to me hundreds of times, that how could you not know hash browns? So they grow as Americans. This picture is from last year. This is another thing, and I find it interesting that now they go with friends to watch movies. This is taken at a theater. That was another thing that that was not part of my culture, that you go to movies with friends. And this picture in the middle is a picture of Halloween, which is again a very quintessentially American thing to do, that is to celebrate Halloween. I'll read some parts of the book from Raising. There's a chapter called Raising Americans. Both my daughters played sports and wanted to wear shorts. My 12-year-old, at the age Muslim girls start considering taking hijab, declared that she couldn't excel in squash unless she played it in shorts. She was the social butterfly of our house. Everyone at school was her best friend, except for those who were her worst enemies. She was dramatic and temperamental, and announced to me one day that she had her dad's permission to choose the boy she would marry. Her weekends started filling up with sleepovers, movie nights, and mall trips with friends. She took pride in her squash and relentlessly trained for it with dad and his friends. She set high goals and standards for herself in everything she did. I had grown up in an hierarchical culture where parents and adults commanded utmost respect. We never addressed any adults, which included our friends' parents, with their first or last names, and called them uncle or auntie. I was an auntie to all my Desi friends' children, and Desi is a word used for people of South Asian origin. But Sabina's friends called me Mrs. Sitwat. Some would also call Saima. When her friends were there, we, the parents, almost functioned in the background, giving them their space. This was unlike our own youth in Pakistan, where our parents occupied the center stage of the house, while we, the children, worked hard to find space in nooks and crannies. Muslim parents read the 4th grade in American public schools. It is time for the baby to lose innocence and attend the notorious developmental class that the schools must offer mandatorily as part of the curriculum for 4th grade onward. Though 4th grade curriculum goes only as far as using deodorant and hitting puberty, for Muslim parents, it's no less than talking about sex. And no good Muslim ever talks about sex. God forbid if such a movie was ever shown at our schools in the Muslim world. As parents have the option to view screening of the video that the kids would be watching, and based on that decide if they felt that their child was ready to face the harsh realities of life or not. I opted to go for the screening that the North Allegheny School offered. That was the school district that we were in Pittsburgh. I was going with an open mind, that is, to what the decision, like many others in Sabina's life, was already taken when Sabina started kindergarten. It was made in the light of the best practices laid down by American Muslim social norms and community preferences. At the screening, I sat in a room full of like-minded, concerned parents. Never before since moving to America had I seen so many people who looked like me in one room. It was a Muslim fest with a few others very concerned parents. Not one I questioned my pre-decided notions as I watched the hazy video, which did a poor job of explaining whatever it was intended to convey. As soon as it ended, the school administrators in the room were bombarded with aggressive questions by angry parents who believed that the school was stealing their children's innocence at an age when they were far from puberty, which was a personalized fact. The district administrators, who were veterans at this conversation, having held it year after year, were quick to absolve themselves of responsibility. If they had the option, they would have stayed away from such profanity. But they were mandated by the PA Department of Education to offer developmental classes to their students. The video was to be shown at the end of a day, the date for which was announced in the beginning of the school year. We had the option of picking up our child earlier that day if we did not want them to be part of the developmental program. I was one of the proud parents who duly did that and saved my 9-year-old from undue exposure to adult content. Sabina was surprised that I would pick her up from school before closing time. I concocted some lame explanation, which I could see my child was smart enough to know was untrue, but she happily took her early dismissal from school and did not probe any further. Next day, she informed me that she heard from her friends that she missed an important class at school, which was full of useful information. At that point, I told her that I did not want her to be in that class. Sabina's response to this was, "But why, Amma? The class was just about sex." Never again would I go through the trouble of early dismissal and keeping my daughter away from any other developmental classes through grade school. This is just one of the small things that we fight every day. So, and this is the question that I want you to explore as well personally. And if you are a professor or a student, take it home with yourself. That and there are two parts to it. That how do immigrants find belonging in the United States, in America? But then who creates that belonging? Where would that come from? And these are a few things that created belonging for me. Again, it does not mean that this is everyone's story and this is how everyone would find it. But there's great joy in food. There's great joy in breaking bread together. Communities come together through food. Everyone enjoys it. In fact, I'm in the process of doing a digital storytelling project. It is supported by Maryland State's Arts Council, called Food at Home. And it documents stories of immigrant women, of women who grew up in first-generation American families. And we are just talking about favorite foods and how that food has helped create a sense of community and native culture in home away from home. So these are some meatballs. We actually made a couple of hundred of those and we served them at a fundraiser that was held in Pittsburgh. That's me and my friends, and we put on chef hats and we served our version of meatball. It's called kofta curry to whoever came. And that became a tradition from then onwards. So the soup kitchen, there was a shelter and a soup kitchen that hosted that fundraiser, and they would invite us every year and they would have a competition. And over the years, our food, which was prepared by women at home, we would just gather together either at someone's house or at a mosque and cook food. And it was in competition with restaurant food, but it started winning competition, which was cool. It brought us some good name. This is a picture from our mosque, from the masjid I belong to, Muslim Association of Greater Pittsburgh. I believe this picture is from one of the outreach events we hosted. And that is another thing that Muslim organizations as well as mosques do more and more, which is to invite the local community and mingle with the local community. So this picture that you see on your left is from what we called an interfaith or outreach iftar. Our mosque hosted this during Ramadan. And we would invite anyone who would love to join us. We always had a great representation. One thing sticks with me. Whenever I talk about interfaith events or outreach events, there was one event that we hosted in 2017. And that was a rough time to be a Muslim in the United States. And we had an outreach event, and I was leading the event, and I asked if there are any comments in the end. And this gentleman stood up and he said that he had seen an informational flyer for our event, and he wanted to come, and he was working out at his gym in the morning, and he mentioned it to one of his friends there, and he said that if he would like to join. And he said that his friend said that, why would you want to go to a terrorist camp on Saturday? And though it was sad to hear, but I was very happy to see that gentleman there, because he's going to go back and tell his friend that it was not a terrorist camp. We had some really good food. And that is something. So if you ever have an opportunity to go to a mosque, you can definitely count on good. Yeah, and that's me sitting with, they were part of the local administration. And it has been mentioned in my introduction that I had the opportunity to visit Punxsutawney on Groundhog Day. That is also an interesting story. It was really fun, great event. We wanted to visit. It's a big holiday in Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh is southwestern Pennsylvania, which is very close to Punxsutawney. So every year the girls in their schools would talk about Groundhog Day, and we would watch the live transmission on TV. And we wanted to visit, but it was not until this one year, which was, I believe it was 2018. And we said, okay, let's go. And when I started looking at hotels in the area, yeah, that's something I probably never learned through my time, like looking for a place to stay at a busy place last minute. And it was 1 month from Groundhog Day, and this is January. So you would think, who would visit southwestern Pennsylvania at this time? And there was no place to stay within 60 miles of Punxsutawney. And they were also going fast. So I just decided to went and write an op-ed about it in Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which was apparently read by people in Punxsutawney, and they invited us. And it was the most beautiful experience, because we get to stay with a family in Punxsutawney. And since then, we have been devotees of the Weather Prophet. This is another question, and this is the note on which I will end. And who gets to be an American? Is it just people from a certain race, religion, skin color who can be called Americans? Or are we all Americans? And those of you who would know that those who are naturalized citizens, people like me, they actually go through a whole process of becoming American. It's a long, tedious process. I see one of my friends from grad school here, and he would probably recognize the picture, right? These are, this picture is from, and I just happened to land on this picture again for tonight. I had a very generic Shutterstock picture of people of different colors and skin tones here. And I was going through my computer and old pictures, and I saw this one. And to me, this is the beauty of America. And the person in the middle is my friend Jinwei from China, and she was a student from China at this time, but now she is also a US citizen. I recently met her in Boston. She has a daughter now. So if I would end on this note and take this thought with you and explore it and use it to build community. Thank you. Atika, you will be doing the Q&A? Maybe we can use this microphone, or I can use this microphone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Saima, for letting us get a glimpse of your life. We are now going to open it up to the audience if they have any questions, but let me start with my question.
Sure.
Because I'm here right now. So my question to you is, through your journey, as a Muslim immigrant woman of color with Pakistani heritage, I'm sure you were subjected to a lot of stereotypes. There must be a lot of questions that have been asked repeatedly. So can you tell us some of those questions that you have had to address repeatedly regarding your identities, your many identities that you hold?
Yes, yes. And of course, the stereotypes are both external and internal within the Muslim community as well. Like we have expectations of how we as Muslims are supposed to behave and as American Muslims. But in terms of the external stereotypes that most Muslims answer all the time, a big question is that are all Muslims terrorists? And that is something that even my children had to answer, especially during at the time of election of 2016. And I have written about it extensively in the book. So that is one of them. But there are many others. There are stereotypes related to food. There are stereotypes related to what a Muslim looks like, which is and there are also, there's research on this, that Muslim women who look like Muslim women, which is when they cover their heads with hijab, are more subjected to hatred than Muslim women who are not identified as such. There is also a big misconception. I teach a class called Muslims in the Neighborhood, and I have taught it for various institutions by this time. And one thing which I always find is a question about the Shia-Sunni divide in Islam. And I do want to use this platform to say that though there are some ideological differences, and yes, there are theological differences, the schism is not as big as it is made to be in the Western world. So, living in Pakistan, again, not to say that it does not exist, but we do live together and practice Islam in a very similar way, except for a couple of rituals here and there, which may be different. So these are some of the stereotypes and questions that I get all the time.
I will go around now. If any of you have any questions, please raise your hand so that I can see you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good evening, and thank you so much for the talk. I want to ask a question as it relates to this very last slide and something you alluded to previously in terms of belonging. And would you say being an American, does that have to equate to belonging? Do you have to feel as if you are included in the society and belong in society to be American, or can't be American without feeling as if you belong here still? And this is coming from a woman, myself, woman of color, that, again, naturalized citizen, has been here since I was 7 years old. I still have an accent. And so there's always that disparity and that question, do I really belong, and am I really an American?
Yeah, that's true. And I also struggle with that at times, if I belong or not. And especially writing about children, and I still experience it, especially in the company where I don't have friends. So let's say children's school, that you feel you don't belong here. You cannot do the small talk. You look different. People know each other from times unknown. Their families were together. They lived in the same neighborhood, and there definitely is. I say that this is a two-way street, that immigrants have to make an effort and the community around them have to make an effort to include. But then I also like to use an analogy that for the community or for the neighborhoods, that think of immigrant or the person who's new to the community as a middle school child. As someone who's new in middle school, they want to belong. They want to be part of this community. They want to join for the neighborhood block party. They want to come have drinks with you, but they just don't know if they are welcomed or not. And I feel that sometimes our community like that, and some like that more than others. So some communities are more welcoming, but some are less diverse. And there's definitely a push and pull of belonging there. So, so I would ask you again that, you know, when you mentioned that, and I would think that that is from your personal experience, have you also felt that internally in your community?
As much as I've been immersed in my community, immediately after moving to the United States, I've been in the same community ever since. As you said, there are still so many aspects about my identity that are so different from that of my community. And even if it's not different, it's still, dare I say, I may still be on guard. Do I still have to fully explain myself, my culture, my people? If I say something, do I need to go ahead and upon what I intended on saying or the impact I intended on having with my comments? So I don't know. I feel as if my identities are transitional. And in some spaces, I feel more included and as if I belong. And in other places, I still don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely agree with that sentiment. And another time in recent past, when I went through this and experienced it myself, and I had the opportunity to talk to other South Asians about it, and we all felt that we were kind of in the same boat, was in 20, and when there were conversations happening across the country between the whites and the black, and to reclaim the place. And then there was the East Asian community, which was facing hatred. A lot of South Asians or Desis did struggle with, where do we belong in this? Like, are we Americans because we are not white or we are not black? I was working at a private school here in Baltimore at that time, and there were special sessions for which were only meant for white and black people. So it was exclusionary, like right from the description of it. And it left us wondering, where do we belong? Sure.
Thank you, Saima. Yeah.
I don't know if this question was kind of already answered, but I'm an immigrant myself. I'm only 20, so I have a lot more to learn. But
You will. Trust me, you will.
on the basis of like belonging, do you feel like there are because there's code switching is something that I feel like a lot of people, especially people of color, whether you're an immigrant or not, you have to figure out how to code switch. But especially being an immigrant, do you feel like you've lost a part of like what made you you before you came here? Or do you find that you've kept that with you and just tweaked it a little bit? Because sometimes I feel like I have to like leave behind what I was or what makes me me in order to like find that space. But like, how do you like, is that what you do? And how do you that?
Very good question. And I have to say that, you know, again, this is not a singular story. Different immigrants have different experiences, but the younger you are when you migrate to the US, the easier it is for you to adapt and be a master of that code switching that you are saying. I was not old. I was 23, but I have always been very immersed in my culture, I would say. So it has been, I think I was just naturally resistant to adapt in some ways. And I still am. Like, there are parts of my culture that I cannot let go. So even in my house, I see there is a difference between my husband and myself. Like, his journey has been different. His how he feels. I feel that despite how he is, because he is so adaptable, his story has been less of a story of a struggle and more of just accommodating and taking things along and becoming part of it. So I have seen everything, like, you know, different, whatever works for your personality. But the younger you are going to school here, you have friends here, you would experience culture in a much different way than I would have as a married woman. So that will be your journey, your story to write.
Thank you.
Sure. Atika, then there's also a hand at the back once this question is done.
Okay, so my question is like, what difficulties did your kids or they still face when you came to the US, and how is that affecting them? And do you think that they fit in with the culture or not?
Okay. And tell me if I don't understand your question correctly. Your question is about my children, right?
Yes.
That what their experience has been like. Okay. So both my girls were born here in the United States. So they never were born in Pakistan. If you ask them where they're from originally, they would say they're from Pittsburgh. So people are very surprised. But having said that, they're Muslim to the core, and that is not something that I have done, I would say, anything to instill in them. It is just something they, I would say, learned from their environment. And we used to visit Pakistan more often, but now with schools, I go more often because my mom is sick. She has advanced Parkinson's, but the girls do not go as much. So I feel that they are culturally Americans. They definitely enjoy aspects of Pakistani culture. Food is one. They speak some language. Actually, my older one does speak more Urdu than the younger one, who barely speaks any Urdu. But they understand, and they have kept parts of the culture. But in some ways in which they are culturally American, I like to say, is the relationship between the relationships they have with us as parents, the relationships they have with their teachers, because of course they grew up in a much different environment and educational system than we did. Also the core values of America, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. They are very used to expressing their opinions and ideas in a way that I don't think I was at their age. So I like to say that they are culturally American. In fact, there was once a person working at our house, and the girls were little at that time, and they were playing in the backyard with one of our neighbor's children. And this person commented that your children are just like American children. And I said, they are American children. They were born here. And he said, yeah, but still, they're just like American children. So yeah, there's that thing. And again, coming to what does an American look like, because they would talk like the Americans, which is like the standard, but look different. They're brown skin like me. Does that answer your question?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Hi. I'm somebody that's a recent practicing Muslim, and I liked how you made the distinction between culture and religion, because that's something that I personally have been like grappling with when like just delving into this just whole new world. And I just wanted to know if you had any additional comments on that topic, especially just coming from Pakistan to America, and if you think that, have you like accepted American culture, or at least, well, obviously I've seen you have by just how you talked about the community, but I just wanted to know if you had any additional comments.
Sure. I mean, in terms of adaptation, thank you for that question. That is a whole area of study, and I have talked at several points in the book, because it's in Pakistan, where I grew up, it is a 99% Muslim country. So living in Pakistan, I was never aware of that distinction. The religion and culture is informed by each other, and therefore, to me, it was what I wore. It was almost that this is what Muslims wear. While when you go to a different country, that is not what Muslims wear. Muslims can wear all sorts of clothes in different parts of the world. So that's one question. It's a constant area of study, that the difference between religion and culture always informs religion, and therefore there is this community called American Muslims, because they are in sync with their religion and culture, and the American culture has informed this version of Islam that is here. There's also a huge African American Muslim community and within the Muslim community, and they have their own culture, which is very American. Nation of Islam, which is a sect of Islam, and whatever some people may say that it is or not, but yes, it is a sect of Islam, and it is a purely American sect of Islam. It originated here. So so these are some of the things, and in terms of adaptability, a person adapts or not adapts as much as some of it is natural and some of it is forced. But I would say that most immigrants who come to the United States are in love with this country. Like, that's why we made the choice to be here. In fact, it is only when you are here, the stark realities strike you. It is only when you are here you realize that people have a lot of misconceptions about Islam and Muslims. Otherwise, most immigrants, when they come to the United States, are ready to be Americans. That's why we are here. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yes, there's a question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
I have a question. I was a bit tardy, so I hope nobody asked this or you didn't go over it already, but I was wondering, raising your children in America, are you trying to, or do you try to implement some of like Pakistani culture in them? And if so, how? If that makes any sense.
It has been a long journey. Thank you for asking that.
No problem.
So this was part of my and my husband's, I should say, growth and our own development in our roles as parents, that we thought we would, because to us there was no distinction between religion and culture. But the more you firstly, we also saw, as you know, our children grew older, we also were part of a huge Pakistani community in Pittsburgh, and we saw that people who had older children, they struggled with that ideology of forcing another culture on children. Again, religion is something that is different. It is universal. In fact, in Islam, there is a concept of pan-Islamism or Muslim Ummah. Like all Muslims do profess the same thing, but cultures are different, countries are different, people are different. So very soon, early in life, early in parenthood journey of being a parent, we gave up on that. And I think my philosophy as a parent has been that keep the good of both the cultures and leave the bad. And that definition of good and bad has to come from our value system. What are our values as a family? Some of it is informed by religion, some of it is informed by our experiences. And we often talk to children about it, that why is something right or not right in either one of the cultures, in the Pakistani culture or the American culture. That's it.
Thank you. That was great. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saima, for the wonderful insights of your personal journey. It's been very enlightening. Thank you indeed. I just want to give a perspective, if I may, again, as a Muslim, as a immigrant, also faculty here at the College of Education. And I do teach about diversity, trained into training teachers. What is interesting is the fact that the diversity that we immigrants bring in here and the lack of benefits that are shared amongst the larger American society. I say this because we are in some ways such a rich country in terms of cultures, languages, ways of doing things within our own cultures, and yet in a classroom which is very diverse, where all these kids come together. The question is, how come that as an education system or as a society, we haven't drawn from each other's experiences? I often tell my students that Zheng He, who was a Muslim voyager from China, was sent all over the world, and he took 7 voyages to bring cultural knowledge from all parts of the world to China. And I never knew about this till I was in China just before the Olympics. I don't know whether it was 2004, the first earlier one. And there was a whole museum on Zheng He, and they had honored Zheng He because they said, if it wasn't for Zheng He, who brought this different cultural understanding to our country, we would not be what we are today in China. You know, it was just a very interesting, mind-opening experience. So I want to give you a little example, if I may,
Yeah, sure.
of a little Indian girl, and we talk about South Asian girl, who was in a classroom, and the parents or mother used to send her with something hair, you know, some kind of foil, or, and the children were very, she was new in the class, and they would just, you know, how kids can be sometimes mean to each other, right?
Yes.
And they said, "Ooh, she's smelling," you know, and there was this very averse response to her. And so here comes the question of educators, you know, in a situation like that, where the teacher could have said to the parent, stop using what you are using in your child's hair because she's not able to make friends.
Right. Yeah.
Instead, this teacher brought the mother over, you know, parent, the mother came and she said, what do you use in your child's hair? And she said, oh, that is coconut oil. So she turned it into a lesson for all the kids, where the mother came in with a coconut and a bottle of oil. And then it was a lesson for everybody that what you smell is what this is. And so the familiarity and unfamiliarity often makes these tensions, especially amongst children.
Yeah.
And so once the kids knew, it became a cool thing. Oh, you know, this is coconut oil. How nice. And so that was how the child was made to be accepted, and and that lesson was later on, as I understand, taken further to say, what are the different types of uses of coconut, you know, of lotions and for hair and for skin and all kinds of things. My message, based on your rich sharing that you did today, is what we lack here in America is how do we as Americans share these cultural differences and make our country here even richer by knowing each other's ways and enriching ourselves. Thank you.
And therefore, thank you so much to the Arts and Asian Arts and Culture Center for hosting tonight's talk.
Any other
Any other
questions?
questions? Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out at this time. And stay in touch. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, any social media of your choice. And I would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Saima.
Oh yeah. Okay. So if you like the excerpts, the book is on sale outside. No pressure though.
So I would just like to, and if you can just hold on for a second, I have an announcement. On October 25th, we have a movie screening that the Center for Student Diversity have collaborated with the International Students and Scholars Office. So the movie, it's a documentary based on the writings of an author named Jack Shaheen, and it's called Real Bad Arabs. It's REEL, Real Bad Arabs. And it talks about how Hollywood has vilified Arabs and Muslims and people who look like Arabs for a very long time, and that Islamophobia is not something that happened after 9/11. We're going to have a panel discussion after the screening. So I would like you all to please, and it's at 4 o'clock in the theater right here on October 25th. So please be a part of it as well. Thank you.